Chapter 196, Sharing one room. Phoebe obviously couldn't take up residence within the dark mental, and now that her relationship with Han Sha-oh was out in the open, he naturally needed to stay with her. Han Sha-oh finally left with Phoebe after dining with Emily and sweet-talking her quite a bit, intent on finding a hotel for the two of them. Hotels of various sizes could be found in great number in the Valley of Sunshine. Because there was a high number of traveling merchants and adventurers coming and going, the amount of entertainment facilities were no less than that. Brightly colored hazy lights shone out from each hotel onto the streets, alternating with ladies clothed in sexy or innocent attire casting come-hither eyes at passers-by on the streets, trying to lure customers in. Han Sha-oh walked next to Phoebe and didn't look anywhere else. She was quite satisfied with that, but it was actually because Han Sha-oh had already vented his energy on Emily's voluptuous body earlier, so he didn't have any evil thoughts in his mind right now. After a while, Phoebe stopped in front of a luxurious-looking hotel. She tugged on Han Sha-oh with her little hand and walked inside with him. The small skinny owner was already smiling fawningly at them in front of Phoebe before she'd even opened her mouth, saying ingratiatingly, "Noble Miss Phoebe, will it be the same room as last time?" Nodding, Phoebe had an aloof expression on her face as she handed her crystal card over without saying a word. Judging from the owner's expression, it was obvious that this wasn't Phoebe's first visit here. It looked like she'd traveled to many places in her travels to and fro for the Boost Merchant Guild. Retrieving her crystal card and key, Phoebe turned her head to smile at Han Sha-oh and tugged on his arm, leading him inside. It was nicely warm inside the hotel and completely different from the brutal cold outside. Bright lights hung in the hallways and shed ample light throughout the entire hotel. The solid wood floors gleamed like a mirror, and shoes sounded out clearly when they tapped against the floor. The sounds were actually quite pleasing to the ear, so it was apparent that these floors weren't ordinary. Han Sha-oh realized that Phoebe hadn't arranged another room for him, and some ambiguous emotions grew in his heart as they continued walking down the hallway. "Phoebe's not planning on sharing a bed with me, is she?" Han Sha-oh couldn't help but cast a look full of passion at Phoebe as they walked. Phoebe's long brown hair naturally fell down towards the floor like a waterfall, swaying around her translucent cheeks and long neck as she sashayed. Her brows were like the waxing moon, and her skin gleamed richly with the splendor of the stars. Her lips were as red as cherries, making one want to give them a fierce bite. "You big pervert, what are you looking at?" Phoebe suddenly stopped and glared at Han Sha-oh with slightly flushed cheeks. Han Sha-oh's gaze had been fiery, with a strong sense of possessiveness within. Phoebe was stupid. She could naturally see all of it clearly and couldn't help but speak up as her heart beat in panic. "No, nothing." Han Sha-oh returned to himself and immediately concealed the lecherous look in his eyes. "Why aren't we walking anymore? We're here. What nonsense are you thinking of? Don't you see that the door is right in front of you?" Phoebe's clear eyes were bashful as she glared at Han Sha-oh again, pointing at the door. Indeed, Han Sha-oh noticed a tightly shut door when his gaze followed her jade arms. This was also the end of the hallway, and it seemed like it was the most quiet room in the hotel. "Nothing much, just thinking of you." Han Sha-oh chuckled evilly and looked straight at Phoebe. "You bad jerk, you only know how to fob me off with sweet words." Sweetness rose in Phoebe's heart as she spoke softly. "Nua, I really was thinking of you just now." Han Sha-oh said, aggrieved. "Then you weren't thinking nice thoughts. Judging from the way you were leering earlier, you must have been thinking something dirty." Phoebe naturally wouldn't believe anything at this point and snorted softly as she flicked a glance at Han Sha-oh. He had indeed been thinking of nothing nice just now. Han Sha-oh could only chuckle dryly after Phoebe had hit the nail on the head, and then hurried, "Phoebe, hurry and open the door. I'm really tired after such a long day. Let's go and shower and sleep." Phoebe didn't continue questioning as she took out the key to open the door. She moved aside to let Han Sha-oh in and then closed the door behind him. A spacious living room greeted them with several fur couches placed on top of a soft carpet. Out of the 4 rooms, there were 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom and 1 storage room for clothes and random knickknacks. "Do you think I didn't know what you're thinking of, Humphrey? There are 2 rooms here and each of us will have 1 I will run through whoever barges into my room again. Phoebe threw back her head and threatened Han Sha-oh as she lit the fireplace, making the internal temperature slowly rise. Hey, what if whoever barges in runs into a beauty having a wet dream and then throws herself into his arms? Han Sha-oh chuckled evilly. You dratted damned bastard. How dare you mention that? Phoebe's face turned bright red as she ran angrily up to Han Sha-oh and reached out her slender hands to give him a fierce pinch around the waist. He first played along and cried out painfully, then yanked her arm around her back and kissed her unceremoniously. Han Sha-oh explored and ravaged her mouth like a dragon in the ocean as she grunted in protest. Phoebe struggled symbolically for a bit before slowly weakening, and her hands that had formed fists that pounded Han Sha-oh's chest suddenly twined towards his neck like snakes, her tongue entangling with Han Sha-oh's. Han Sha-oh laid her down on the soft carpet and tasted her sweetness while rubbing his hand over her purred bottom. When Han Sha-oh's hands finally started fondling her chest, Phoebe suddenly started struggling and pushed him away fiercely. She then glared at him with embarrassment as she said with great allure, "It looks like I need to be careful or you'll take advantage of me whenever I let my guard down. Ugh, after running for so long my body stinks. I need to take a shower, you stay out here." Phoebe escaped to the bathroom after saying these words and shut the door with a great bang. The sounds of water flowing came from inside afterwards. It looked like she was indeed in a great hurry to wash away the dirt from her body. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. Knocking sound suddenly sounded at this moment. Han Sha-oh blinked and wondered if it was Emily looking for them. He walked over in confusion and opened the door. A bouquet of brilliant fresh flowers was shoved in his face. It looked like there were at least 100 of them as they emanated a wonderful fragrance. The bouquet was abruptly pulled back and a handsome face revealed itself in front of Han Sha-oh. His eyebrows were dashing and his eyes clear. A broad forehead, firm nose, and apart from somewhat skinny cheeks, this face could be labeled uncommonly handsome. The charming face had been wearing a disarming smile when it suddenly drew together into a frown and the face became covered in clouds. He looked at Han Sha-oh in an unfriendly manner. "Who are you? Where's Phoebe? She's showering." "And who are you?" Han Sha-oh blinked and then reacted. This must be one of Phoebe's admirers. He too showed the fellow a rather unfriendly face. "Showering? Then what are you doing here?" When he heard that Phoebe was showering inside and Han Sha-oh was inside the room, his expression grew even uglier. "I'm Florida, chief of the Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band. I'm Phoebe's good friend. I naturally have something to discuss with her, so don't block the way." He stared at Han Sha-oh angrily and roared, lowly magical pulses emanating from his body. When Han Sha-oh heard that he was Florida, chief of the Rainbow Sickle, Han Sha-oh was immediately startled and looked at this person with more than a hint of wariness. The Rainbow Sickle Mercenary Band was just as famous as the Kyra Mercenary Band. However, the Rainbow Sickle was made up mostly of those from the Lancelot Empire. The Rainbow Sickle had been the strongest within the Valley of Sunshine a few years ago and had been in charge of order. However, the original chief unfortunately fell when defending the valley against robbers once. This was why their fortune had suddenly fallen. It was rumored that this person was a light archmage and seemed to have something to do with the Church of Light. His strength was unfathomable, and although he was an upright person, he was decisive and vicious. He never had any mercy for his enemies and had a great reputation within the mercenary band. Han Sha-oh hadn't thought that such a person would be one of Phoebe's admirers. Although Han Sha-oh felt a bit of a headache knowing the other's identity, he wasn't afraid. Han Sha-oh said coldly, "Sorry, I'm Phoebe's boyfriend. She can't see you at the moment, so you can come back next time." Han Sha-oh snorted coldly after speaking and slammed the door shut. Chapter 197. Making a decisive move. Florida was far more domineering than Han Sha-oh would have thought. He could feel a dangerous pulse of magic the instant he shut the door. Han Sha-oh immediately sprang backwards. The door exploded with a tumultuous bang as the room wreathed itself in white light. Large pieces of wooden slats flew across the room as Florida's handsome face once again appeared in front of Han Sha-oh. He still clutched the bouquet of fresh flowers tightly with a strongly pulsating magic staff embedded with a red, blue and yellow crystal in his right hand. "I said I want to see Phoebe. Didn't you hear me?" Florida looked harshly at Han Sha-oh as he bit off his words. At roughly 25 or 26, Florida's age was similar to the deceased Clark. The two of them had many similarities, both having the same high level of strength and charming exteriors. However, Although Clark was devious, he wouldn't flaunt it so boldly. He at least understood that his identity as a noble, conscious he had to conceal his emotions, he made his moves in the dark. On the other hand, Florida looked like a completely lawless person with an even more brash style, seemingly having no reservations at all. "And I said don't disturb our rest," Han Sha-Oh snorted coldly and flashed to Florida's side like lightning. He raised a fist with magical yuan circulating within it and smashed it towards Florida's face. Han Sha-Oh's sudden move was outside of the other's expectations as panic suddenly appeared on his face. He threw out the bouquet in his hands and swiftly backpedaled. Han Sha-Oh's punch whistled through the air as it smashed the bouquet to pieces. Petals flew everywhere as a floral fragrance wafted through the air. When this punch had obliterated the bouquet and seemed like it would land on Florida's face, a strong magic pulse suddenly burst from his body. A rainbow-colored glass-like magic shield suddenly enveloped him like an enormous light bubble. Bam! Han Sha-Oh's fist connected with the shield. He felt like he was punching cotton candy as the shield distorted at the point of contact. The impression left by the fist deepened until Han Sha-Oh's blow stopped right above Florida's well-defined nose, unable to proceed any further. Completely flustered, Florida was forced back a few steps, bringing the force field with him and widening the gap between him and Han Sha-Oh. Disarrayed, he looked at Han Sha-Oh with an even more unfriendly glint, as if Han Sha-Oh had become his mortal enemy. "You dared to attack first." Florida's voice was as distorted as his expression as he roared furiously at Han Sha-Oh. Han Sha-Oh shook his hand and retracted his fist, pointing at the shattered room door. He said coldly, "You trespassed the moment you broke through the door." "I'm just defending myself." Nodding his head with a frosty smile, Florida cast a dark glance at Han Sha-Oh. "Very good, you've got some guts. However, you won't get a chance to come near me again now that our distance has been increased. Let me see what you're made of now." Florida once again stepped back after he spoke and raised the staff in his right hand, planning on facing off with Han Sha-Oh. In response to Florida's move, Han Sha-Oh solemnly brought out the Demon Slayer Edge from his space ring and prepared to take Florida's attack. As a light archmage, his strength was certainly uncommon. Han Sha-Oh had tested him just now and had noticed that his reaction was swift and movements agile. It was obvious that he'd weathered hundreds of battles. Han Sha-Oh hadn't even been able to harm him just now with that punch despite their proximity. Now that they were separated, Florida would be able to deploy his advantage as a mage and would be difficult to deal with. Hasty footsteps sounded at this moment and seemed to approach the room. Just as Han Sha-Oh and Florida were about to really get into it, Vice Chief Harris from the Cairo mercenary band suddenly appeared with a few soldiers. "Isn't this Chief Florida? What are you doing here, creating a mess in territory that's under the Cairo mercenary band's protection instead of staying in yours?" Harris' voice was filled with obvious sarcasm as he maintained the same remote expression from earlier in the day. The splashing sounds from the bathroom suddenly stopped. It seemed that after these disturbances, Phoebe had finally discovered something was happening outside after having her hearing affected by her shower. The wildly posturing Florida looked back at Harris when he heard the latter's voice. He put away the staff in his hand and said with an aloof expression, "I came to visit Miss Phoebe and hadn't expected to be blocked by some blind kid. If you're here to be a guest, then I welcome you on behalf of the owner. However, I hope you don't try to start a fight here, or else our Cairo mercenary band will definitely get involved. You surely know the rules after being in the Valley of Sunshine for so long." Harris snorted coldly when he saw Florida retract the staff in his hands. "Humphrey, today was your lucky day," Florida said coldly to Han Sha-Oh and turned to leave. He halted when he passed by Harris, saying with his back turned to Han Sha-Oh, "In the near future I will definitely retake control of the valley. Then I won't be as polite to you as I am now." Florida laughed heartily after throwing down these words and walked out with large strides, not waiting for Phoebe to come out. Harris had an ugly expression on his face and a vein began to throb on his forehead. He looked like he would go berserk at any time. In fact, Han Sha-Oh knew that he was a berserker. It was said that a berserker's strength was quite astonishing. They were able to use a mysterious method to provoke themselves into a mad state, increasing their strength exponentially and giving them incredible destructive power. Han Han Shao rather wished Harris would go berserk as he looked at the latter. If Harris couldn't control the fury in his heart, he would immediately attack Florida until one of them died. It was a pity that Harris quickly regained normalcy and Han Shao's daydreams didn't play out. Harris cast a detached glance at Han Shao and said, "You still need to pay for the door. Florida's group has great power in the Valley of Sunshine, so you need to be careful after offending him. You can come find us if there's anything you need from the Cairo mercenary band." Although his expression was still aloof, Harris seemed to have undergone a change in attitude towards Han Shao because of their newly acquired common enemy. There were even traces of concern in his words. Han Shao hadn't planned on paying for the door because it had been Florida that had broken it, but his thoughts completely changed after seeing Harris' attitude shift. He did still have need of the Cairo mercenary band to obtain the shop with a place of extreme water, so he laughed decisively and said no problem. Nodding, Harris didn't say anything else and waved his hand, departing with his guards. The room to the bathroom creaked open after Harris left and Phoebe came out wearing a bathrobe like a flower emerging from the water. Her wet hair was plastered all over and a small expanse of red and fair skin was revealed at her chest. Her red lips were full and wet as she flicked her eyes towards the door. "They're all gone?" "All gone." "What's going on with that Florida?" Han Shao looked at Phoebe and asked unhappily. Chuckling lowly, Phoebe hiked up the bathrobe a bit and wrapped her legs tightly. She walked up to Han Shao and batted her wet eyelashes, looking at him with interest. She teased, "What, are you jealous?" "Yeah, I'm jealous. That kid doesn't look too bad and came looking for you with a huge bouquet. He even told me the boyfriend to get out of the way. I'm very pissed off right now." Han Shao was quite direct as he looked irritatedly at Phoebe. Her body softening, Phoebe sat on Han Shao's legs and chuckled softly. "I used to come to the valley a lot and had business dealings with the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band, but it's always been him pursuing me. I've never had anything to deal with him." Alright, don't be mad. I'll explain things to him next time so that he doesn't bother me in the future. How's that? No point in explanations. I don't think that Brad is the kind to accept such things. I didn't like him from my first impression of him, but I think he thinks the same of me. I think our grudge has been well and truly formed. Han Shao shook his head. "Then what do we do?" "The Rainbow Sickle mercenary band has great power in the valley and is second only to the Cairo mercenary band. It's said that they've been recruiting in recent times and have even hired a group of experts from the Church of Light. They seem to want to replace the Cairo mercenary band. It will be very troublesome to stay in the valley if we've offended them." Phoebe was startled and spoke with some worry. "We'll deal with matters as they arise. He's not the sole ruler of the valley. He won't be able to do anything to me." Han Shao snorted coldly and spoke without fear. Chapter 198, Conduct oneself well. Florida had broken the door with his appearance, and so Han Shao and Phoebe had no choice but to occupy another room. They paid 20 gold coins as compensation for the door, and Phoebe asked for 2 rooms so that Han Shao would have no opportunity to get up to any shenanigans. He didn't remain idle when Phoebe returned to her room to rest. He located the room's closet and set up the transportation matrix, then adjusted his mental strength to release a dark mist spell within the closet before stepping into the matrix. The cemetery of death was as desolate as ever. Han Shao immediately saw Gilbert's enormous true form as soon as he stepped out. He was fast asleep amidst piles of bones and hadn't noticed Han Shao's arrival at all. Gilbert had taken on a great responsibility in the past 2 days and was likely truly tired after being injured again. Han Shao didn't disturb him and went to where the Earth Elite zombie and Yin demons were being refined. He first went to the Yin demon cave to infuse it with more magical yuan. He noticed that there were only 9 wraiths left in the cave now. After fighting every day and every night, the day at which he could collect the Yin demons drew closer and closer. The Earth Elite zombie exuded an immense presence of life. The earth chi that circulated around the entire cemetery of death was thinning out. Balls of gray chi spread out from the center of the place of extreme earth and slowly coalesced into one place as if a large hand was tightening its grasp on them. A marvelous connection emanated from the earth. Han Shao started as an exuberant feeling flowed into his heart. He sensed carefully and discovered that this joy was coming from the Earth Elite zombie that was buried deep in the ground. It looked like Han Shao's arrival had caused the Earth Elite zombie below to become quite joyous. After the long duration of time in which it had absorbed Earth Chi and nourishment from the resources that Han Shao had spent an enormous sum to acquire, the Earth zombie was no longer just a simple zombie but had simple instinctual feelings. Now that Han Shao had located the places of extreme earthwood and water, he was also confident in gaining all the materials that he needed through Phoebe's merchant guild. He'd be able to refine the earthwood and water elite zombies. When these three elite zombies were formed, Han Shao's personal strength would greatly increase as well. As long as he could find places of extreme metal and fire as well, he'd be able to put a frightful formation with all 5 elemental zombies together. He would have even more of a right to speak in this world. After that, Han Shao didn't wake Gilbert when he saw all was functioning normally here. He returned soundlessly to the hotel in the Valley of Sunshine and sat cross-legged on the bed meditating. He relaxed his entire body and slowly sank into meditation, not letting up on the slightest bit of time to increase his mental strength. Phoebe came over early in the morning with her hair tied up. Her long blue skirt made her appear even more elegant and graceful. She naturally tucked her hand into the crook of Han Shao's arm as she walked over and tugged him outside, saying, "Come on, let's keep shopping in the valley today and collect all the materials you need." Han Shao readily agreed. He'd planned on collecting materials only for the Wood Elite zombie before, but now that he'd discovered a place of extreme water, he needed to start collecting the materials required for refining the Water Elite zombie as well. As it bordered 3 countries, the Valley of Sunshine saw an endless parade of merchants through its borders, and all sorts of strange materials could be obtained here. Han Shao and Phoebe did indeed locate many of the needed items through some patient searching. The noon sunlight filtered down from the sky into the Valley of Sunshine, basking the entire valley in its light. Its warmth was quite comfortable, and Phoebe's hand started rubbing her stomach after they finished perusing the most recent shop. She turned to smile at Han Shao. "I'm a bit hungry, let's go get some food." "You're familiar with this place and know where all the good food is. Just lead me to it," Han Shao responded with a smile. It was said that at certain levels of magical cultivation, cultivators could go without eating or drinking and just make use of the energy within their body to maintain their lives for 100 years. They had no need for food to nourish their bodies. However, Han Shao had yet to reach that stage, and apart from nourishment, food was also an enjoyment to him. Phoebe led the way in the front as the two walked into a small storefront. A few 1-meter-tall dwarves walked out from within and enthusiastically led them to their table. The shop wasn't too big and the decorations weren't that luxurious. There were only a few simple chairs, but it was incredibly crowded. Some merchants wearing rich furs with diamond rings sparkling on their fingers sprawled lazily over narrow chairs and tables, shoveling food into their mouths without a thought of their images. The two sat down in a quiet corner near the window. Phoebe didn't ask Han Shao for his opinion before she said to a dwarf waiting on the side, "The best food in the store." The dwarf smiled faintly and bowed urbanely, then quickly left to busy himself. Dwarves are quite an odd race. Some of them are adept at forging weapons, others crafting beer. There are those who like cooking as well. Whenever they fall in love with a craft, they always bring about some surprises in their work. The dwarves in this shop were from a remote mountain valley of the Casey Empire. Their joy in life was to cook all sorts of delicious food. The dishes made by their hands are so tasty that it's hard to forget about them. Phoebe smiled faintly and explained to Han Shao. Having come from another world, Han Shao had grown up with the delicacies of Chinese cuisine. He tasted the food of that world and had always felt that there was a world of difference between the food here and the illustrious history of food culture in China. To be honest, Han Shao didn't truly believe that the food here would be that much more exquisite or tasty compared to what he'd had in hotels before, so he didn't hold too much hope and only went along with Phoebe's words with a smile. Business here was good. One could see from the numbers of customers and their identities that these high-class customers didn't disdain this place because of its scale. From the way some noblewomen were eating, Han Shao could see that they were greatly enjoying the food on their plates. As Han Shao smiled and chatted with Phoebe, the little dwarf brought over 2 plates of odd-looking food and placed it lightly in front of the two. It looked like a strange sort of meat that had been cooked to a bright gleam. An interesting smell wafted into Han Shao-oh's mouth and nose and rather surprised Han Shao-oh. Phoebe in front of him had already started digging in with a knife and fork in hand. It was apparent that she also greatly enjoyed the food. When Han Shao-oh cut into a piece of meat and placed it in his mouth, his brow suddenly uncreased as a delicious taste suffused his mouth. It was like a wondrous magic spell as the deliciousness of food continuously circulated in Han Shao-oh's mouth and nose. His appetite completely expanded. Han Shao-oh immediately dug in with a vengeance after tasting that small bite. He devoured the food like tigers or wolves swallowing their prey. Han Shao-oh belched when his stomach bulged. He complimented, "This really is something alright. No wonder there's so many people trying to squeeze into this small restaurant." "Friend, we meet again." Florida walked in through the door at this time. He stood there in his white magic robes and looked coldly at Han Shao-oh. Phoebe was in the midst of enjoying her food when she lifted her head to look at Florida. She then hailed the dwarf and threw down a bag of gold coins on the table. She rose and said to Han Shao-oh, "Let's go." Han Shao-oh's expression was remote as he waved a hand. "I have nothing good to say to him. You can explain things to him directly. If he keeps bothering you, I'll be happy to have a go or two at him then." Having exchanged a few blows with him yesterday, Han Shao-oh understood that Florida's strength was mysterious and unfathomable. However, Han Shao had both magical cultivation and necromancy magic, as well as the mysterious little skeleton and the almost formed Earth Elite zombie and 3 yin demons. All of this combined made it so that he had no fear of Florida. As his magical cultivation improved each and every day, he had no need to lower his head in front of anyone. Phoebe started when Han Shao spoke thus, and then flashed a smile. "I understand." She moved and walked over to Florida, cold arrogance replacing her smile from a moment ago. When she reached the door, she pointed at Han Shao and said to Florida, "He's my boyfriend. I think we have nothing to talk about. Business is business, but you have no right to interfere in my life. I hope you won't disturb me in the future." Although he was mentally prepared, Florida was still momentarily dazed when he heard these unkind words from Phoebe's mouth. The stiffness on his face faded away when he faced Phoebe, and he even spoke very gently. He stared tightly at Phoebe. "Where does this kid come from? What can he give you? Why choose him?" Sorry, this has nothing to do with you. I hope you conduct yourself well. Phoebe's expression was remote and she also spoke frostily. Nodding, Florida barked out a ghastly laugh. He looked at Phoebe and then at Han Shao in the distance, saying, "All right." 3 times in a row. He then turned and left. "Give me another plate." Han Shao snorted coldly and then turned to the dwarf by his side with a smile. Chapter 199, A Marvelous Sensation. After filling their stomachs and walking out of the shop, Phoebe and Han Shao shopped for a bit longer amidst all the various stores in the Valley of Sunshine. Phoebe then went to find the proper members of the Cairo mercenary band to negotiate for the shop that contained the place of extreme water for Han Shao. Han Shao walked alone towards the shop in which Emily was located and planning on asking Emily to investigate Florida's background. The same elderly man was still watching the door. This shop sold the armor in the style of Lancelot Empire Knights, and because night had yet to fall, there were indeed a few wearing the armor of knights flipping through the wares located towards the front of the store. The elderly man indicated to Han Shao with a slight smile when he saw Han Shao walk in. He pointed to the backyard. Han Shao understood and made a show of picking up a set of clothing, walking over to the door that led to the backyard and walked through it. "How did you run afoul of Florida?" Emily was noticeably taken aback when Han Shao started asking her about Florida with a ruthless expression on his face. "Apart from the information everyone knows about him, do you have anything else?" "I know the Dark Mandal must have some other information on him." Han Shao glanced at Emily. Emily's brow creased faintly as she looked at Han Shao. "Just what is going on here?" Han Shao recounted what had happened last night, going over events simply. Emily then said angrily, "I've long since heard that Florida is arrogant and cocky. I hadn't thought that he would really be so domineering. The Valley of Sunshine isn't in the hands of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band anymore. How dare he act this way?" When he saw Emily also grow angry with him, Han Shao's originally ticked off feelings were suddenly smoothed over. He then asked tenderly, "So what is this Florida's background?" "The Dark Mandal strong stronghold located here within the valley is to collect local information. Florida is neither of the Lancelot Empire nor the Casey Empire. He comes from a vassal state to the Lancelot Empire, and his grandfather is Grand Magus Ferguson of the Church of Light. He has a lofty status in the church, and it's said that he has an extremely high chance of advancing to Magister. Florida grew up in the Church of Light and was personally taught by his grandfather. Apart from light major magics, he's also practiced many thunder magics. These are secrets that most don't know. Since his grandfather taught him personally and his potential is uncommon indeed, he became an archmage at a young age just 3 years ago. The Dark Mantle once kept an eye on him and felt that he would become one of the preeminent experts on the continent. However, he didn't join the Church of Light and suddenly left a few years ago to come to the Valley of Sunshine, joining the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band shortly afterwards. Because he had such great power, he quickly won Chief Jason's trust in an exceedingly short amount of time. Jason even entrusted his only daughter to him. However, old Jason fell in battle against robbers once, and his daughter also went missing as well. It's said that this had something to do with Florida. However, no one has solid evidence of this. Florida naturally took control of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band after Jason's death. There was a group that suspected Florida had something to do with this and left the band and the valley out of resentment and anger. This was how the Cairo mercenary band grew to strength. At the same time, the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band has indeed developed well in Florida's hands these years, and it's gradually recovered all the strength that it had previously lost. It's now become Cairo mercenary band's greatest opponent, and they really might regain control of the valley under Florida's hands. Emily contemplated with a furrowed brow for a bit and conveyed all she knew. After Emily had finished sharing her knowledge, Han Shao said lowly, "A strong enemy indeed. This person's thoughts are vicious and devious to make a move even against his benefactor. These methods are completely against the mission of the Church of Light. It looks like I'll need to be careful." Brian, the Valley of Sunshine is different from other places and is under the jurisdiction of no country. Whoever has the most strength here is king. I know your strength is certainly not inferior to Florida's, but Florida has the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band in his hands, and you will be hard pressed to fight against multiple enemies with your fists alone. I don't think he'd make any moves in the valley thanks to the restraining pressure from the Cairo mercenary band, but you better not venture out easily so that you don't give him any chances to make a move. Emily was obviously very cautious of Florida as she spoke bracingly to Han Shao. "Don't worry, I know." Han Shao's expression was calm as he responded gravely. He paused and said to Emily, "Oh right, why hasn't Elaine brought Belinda after such a long period of time? I left a drop of blood essence in Belinda so she won't be able to do anything at all. Has something happened along the way?" Emily shook her head with a wry smile after Han Shao's words as she responded, "I was worrying as well. Elaine should have arrived in the valley by now. Has something really happened to her?" "Forget it, I'll take a trip and search the roads around the valley for a bit." Han Shao thought for a bit and answered, "No, you offended Florida, so you probably shouldn't leave the valley for a while. He has great power in this area, and if he knew that you left the valley he would definitely try to make trouble for you." A look of panic grew on Emily's face as she tried to stop Han Shao. "It's going to be fine. You know how perceptive I am. I'll leave immediately if I discover any signs of danger. In addition, I placed a drop of blood essence on Belinda and only I can sense her within a certain distance. I must take this trip in order to conclude this mission perfectly." Han Shao smiled dashingly and paid no heed to the threat of Florida at all as he spoke quite at ease. "Since you insist, then let me go with you." Emily spoke resolutely to Han Shao when she saw that she couldn't sway him. Shaking his head, Han Shao rejected Emily's suggestion and turned to step outside. He spoke with his back to Emily. "Emily, you should trust me and not try to take care of everything for me like I'm a child. That isn't the kind of life I want. If Florida actually does act, then I'll actually be quite excited." Emily had already started moving but sighed when she heard Han Shao's words. "All right, but you have to be careful. Elaine and Belinda's well-being is nothing compared to your own. You must remember to protect yourself first." "I will," Han Shao responded. The sky was already darkening by the time he walked out of the store. The The various shops on the streets were already closed at this time, and the bright multicolored lights of many places of entertainment replaced the setting sun. Han Shao ignored all the calls and pleas for attention from the thickly made up faces around him striding towards the valley border. Some procedures were needed in order to enter the valley, but none were needed to leave. No one asked Han Shao anything but the two Cairo mercenary band knights look at him with some surprise, seemingly perplexed why the two beauties weren't leaving with him. Han Shao's sharp perceptions noticed that someone was surveilling him as soon as he had stepped out of the valley, but he paid them no heed. There was no need for further thought. It was either members of the Cairo or Rainbow Sickle mercenary band who were keeping an eye on him. It wasn't difficult for Han Shao to shake them of that he was extremely confident about. He'd been walking slowly since leaving the valley, but abruptly picked up his speed. Han Shao's body was like a shooting star as he streaked through the dusk sky. He'd covered several hundred meters in a few breaths and pulled ahead of those keeping an eye on him. When that feeling of being watched disappeared, he suddenly took to the skies and flew close to the lush silver trees, making for Valen City. He sent out a mental command as the demon infant's mystical power mysteriously circulated. Waves of mystical power rippled out from the demon infant and covered the distance in front of him. There was a connection between the demon infant and the drop of blood essence. Han Shao would immediately feel it if the drop of blood essence appeared. As he concentrated his attention on the demon infant and cast his senses out in an attempt to search for the blood essence, a marvelous feeling suddenly grew in his heart. He could suddenly feel the presence of any small or large life forms. As Han Shao inwardly started with shock, that sensation suddenly disappeared. He once again concentrated his attention and bent his mind to finally sense the feeling that had surged into his heart just now. He discovered that he could feel the life forms of the various bugs and small mammals that were hibernating around him. Although this sensation faded in and out and was rather blurry, he was still quite shocked by this. The demon infant suddenly shifted slightly at this point, and the location of the blood essence was transmitted to Han Shao in the next second. Overjoyed, he abruptly picked up his flight speed and sped to where that drop of blood essence was. When he reached his destination, however, he saw Elaine fallen on the ground beneath a large tree, her body covered in blood. Her neck was bent at an unnatural angle as if she'd been forcefully choked to death by a strap. Her body seemed to have been hit by wind blade spells, as multiple bone-deep lacerations had sliced through her shirt. The blood was mixed into the accumulated snow and had melted into bloody water. It looked like she died not too long ago. Suddenly a strong sense of danger suddenly exploded in Han Shao's heart. He started and immediately tried to back up rapidly from Elaine's body. Chapter 200, Dog Eat Dog. An explosion rang out from Elaine's body as her profusely bleeding body suddenly exploded into bloody chunks as a momentous force bended in all four directions. 2 finger bones and 3 arrows of blood made directly for Han Shao with ferocious and frightening power. In that critical moment, the quickly retreating Han Shao immediately chanted out the spell for the bone shield, and a pile of stark white bones immediately formed a white bone shield a meter wide and 1.5 meters tall that floated in the air in front of Han Shao. Cracking sounds rang out crisply as the white bone shield couldn't hold up beneath the tremendous impact it had just received. It exploded into numerous bone fragments that flew every which way as splendid as fireworks. If it had been anyone else, they may not have sensed the danger lurking in Elaine's body and would have been caught unaware by this attack. They likely would have scrambled to face it. However, Han Shao was perceptive and his thoughts moved quickly. A bolt of enlightenment had suddenly struck his heart, and he'd felt the latent danger in Elaine's corpse just now. This was why he'd barely been able to react and retreat in time. Being in the true demon realm, Han Shao's brain had undergone a savage bout of training, and the speed at which he could concentrate and release his mental strength at a speed far faster than ordinary mages. This was why he could chant out the white bone shield spell with such miraculous speed in such a crucial moment. After retreating more than 10 meters and the white bone shield now lying in broken fragments, Han Shao had successfully evaded this obviously premeditated attack. When he cast another glance at Elaine, there was nothing remaining apart from some fresh blood and chunks of flesh. A strong sense of bloodshed suddenly permeated through the air. Han Shao suddenly sensed a stifling feeling, and he immediately knew that this was bad. He'd been catching his breath but started circulating the magical yuan in his limbs without another moment's thought. The trickles of magical yuan made a circuit of his limbs as it wiped away the scent of blood that Han Shao had just sniffed into his lungs. Han Shao had been feeling a bit woozy and tired but now felt strength surge back into his limbs. A vicious plan, a devious enemy. He went over what had just happened and was certain that the blood essence he'd placed in Belinda's neck had been tampered with and transferred into Elaine's body. The enemy had then killed Elaine and used her body as bait, setting 2 traps to ensnare him. They'd first used a spell similar to corpse explosion. Elaine's body had been filled with chemicals so that the moment her body exploded, her fresh blood that was laced with chemicals would become a second round of attack. Such cruel methods that made use of a corpse could only be the brainchild of those fervent cultists of the Calamity Church. Belinda must have been saved by others, or she would have never awoken from the shackles of the blood essence through her power alone. Han Shao immediately planned on leaving this place when his thoughts traveled here, but 2 sets of footsteps started drawing close to where he was. One of them was heavy and the other soft. Han Shao could judge from their weights that the oncomers were a male and a female. A thought struck him as his mind raced furiously. He was weighing up what was the most appropriate method and best timing to handle the 2. However, he needed an opportunity to create the best timing. Han Shao looked around and noticed that there was no good terrain to take advantage of, nor was there any good timing present. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Han Shao's originally upright body then suddenly softened to the ground. When his eyelids covered the sharp look in his eyes, his heartbeat and breathing became uncommonly calm. It was as if he were in a deep coma with no awareness whatsoever. 2 people gradually drew close. Belinda's face was covered by her black veil as usual. Her bright eyes stared tightly at Han Shao without blinking. The other person was rather elderly, as the tips of his hair was a gray-brown color. Fine lines wizened his face like motes as he wore a thick gray cotton jacket. He held on to an knobbed cane in his left hand as his gray-white eyes seemed without energy. He walked slowly over, keeping an eye on the surroundings as well and paying attention not only to just Han Shao. Wait, Belinda. Just as Belinda was about 10 meters from Han Shao, the old man immediately called out with a low raspy voice. Belinda had been staring intently at Han Shao when she immediately stopped upon hearing this call. She turned in confusion and looked at the old man. What is it, Master Edwin? The man called Edwin was from the Calamity Church. His gray-white eyes circled the surroundings again and again before finally settling on Han Shao. He rasped out, there's no blood on his body and there are no obvious signs of injury. He likely wasn't injured by that exploding corpse. Judging from the distance, he may have fainted from the chemicals, but we need to be more cautious. Then, according to your opinion, what should we do? Belinda not only stopped approaching Han Shao after these words, but actually started backing up until she was side by side with Edwin. Shoot an arrow into him. If he's truly in a coma, he won't have the slightest sensation of it, Edwin responded. Han Shao cursed inwardly. This old fart was devious and vicious, all right. He could come up with such a savage plan. This man gave Han Shao a strong sense of danger, but from his body's condition, Han Shao was well aware that this person wasn't a swordsman or a knight. He must be a marvelous mage despite his decrepit body, otherwise he wouldn't be afraid to approach Han Shao. Belinda laughed softly and agreed when she heard Edwin's instructions. She took out a bow and arrow and shakily notched an arrow to the string. Belinda was noticeably not a marksman. Her 2 arms were shaking as her notched arrow shook in Han Shao's direction as well. Because they were so close, Han Shao could sense Belinda holding the bow and arrow even with his eyes closed. Her shaking hands made soft sounds when her arms brushed past her thick clothing. This made Han Shao panic a bit as he weighed whether or not he should take the gamble. If he suddenly exploded into action, he wasn't confident in his ability to kill both of them given their distance from him and the fact that they were both on guard. Han Shao didn't know anything about what methods this Edwin possibly had either, so it was very unwise to take this risk in attacking. Han Shao hardened his heart in the moment that Belinda notched her arrow and decided to just take the hit no matter what. Han Shao understood that they didn't seem to want to kill him from their conversation. This was what caused him to make up his mind. Do it. Edwin's voice was low as he pressed Belinda. Alright. Belinda agreed and released the arrow with a whoosh. The arrow landed in the snow by his left arm as Han Shao lay there nervously. It hadn't touched him at all. It looked like Belinda's shooting skills were beyond grasp, which caused her to miss even at such a close range. "No worries, we have plenty of time, you'll get the hang of it after shooting a few more arrows." No emotion could be heard in Edwin's voice as he spoke slowly. His eyes lit up as he spoke and he focused on Han Shao's body, wanting to glean some clues from it. "All right, I'll try a few more times." Belinda responded and shot out another 3 arrows. All 3 of them missed yet again. Belinda was obviously a bit irritated as she huffed out lightly and took out another arrow. She didn't aim at all this time and shot it directly toward Han Shao. However, the one arrow which she hadn't aimed at all actually turned out to be miraculously accurate. It flew straight toward Han Shao's calf and sank in with a small PFFT. Bright red blood oozed out slowly from his pant leg. This kind of pain had long since become nothing to Han Shao. His heart rate and breathing stayed the same, as did the dull expression on his face, as if he truly sunk into the depths of a drugged coma. "Things should be fine." Edwin nodded and said lowly after observing for a while. Belinda and Edwin then relaxed their guard against Han Shao and approached his position. Han Shao focused his concentration and prepared himself to kill at any second. He would make a move to immediately kill Edwin as soon as the old man approached. As frightening as Belinda was, she was only a threat in group fights thanks to the destructive powers of her golem. Han Shao didn't fear her at all if they were to fight in a place like this. Just as Han Shao made his preparation, more sounds came from the distance. They quickly approached this area, surprising Han Shao as he feigned death on the ground. He wondered who was arriving now. "Chief, that person's here." A loud yell suddenly sounded as a band of a dozen traveled swiftly through the frosty winter wind. "To think he left the Valley of Sunshine of his own accord. He doesn't want to live anymore." Florida's voice suddenly rang out in Han Shao's ears, completely contrary to his expectations. "Chief Florida of the Red Sickle Mercenary Band," Belinda suddenly exclaimed in shock. "No matter who you two are, give me that kid immediately," Florida announced peremptorily as usual when he arrived. Calm restored itself in the eyes of the man called Edwin. He flicked a glance at Florida and the others approaching, first cackling oddly and then rasping out in a voice full of hate. "So you're Florida? It looks like I was right to come to the Valley of Sunshine this time." As Edwin spoke, an immense pulse of magic suddenly emanated from his body. The presence of dark magic suddenly permeated the air towards Florida. 3 enormous black hands materialized in the air, slamming down upon them with a ferocious force that could cleaving the heavens and ground open. All the trees and boulders exploded into dust within that area in the span of a second. Towering trees first creaked audibly and then fell beneath the onslaught of that force. The enormous dark magic spell, the Hand of Death, had been released and 3 10-meter wide hands had appeared. As the terrifying force covered the ground, 4 of the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries couldn't dodge in time and were pounded into bloody mincemeat. "Did your grandfather Ferguson not teach you how to treat your elders?" Edwin's voice was suffused with a cruel smile as he spoke to Florida. Edwin and Belinda were already by Han Shao's side now, and if he wanted to he could make a sudden move and harm Edwin. However, judging from these enormous disturbances, Han Shao understood that Edwin seemed to hate Florida even more. He was trying to kill him after just meeting the man, and his strength was much stronger than Emily, who was also a user of dark magic. On one side was a killer from the Calamity Church, on the other was enemies from the Rainbow Sickle. These 2 groups were both people that he would have to make moves against in the future, and it was all to Han Shao's advantage that they had suddenly started fighting. As opposed to him making a move now, he might as well continue to play dead and have them dog eat dog. "Just who are you?" Florida and the rest of the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries had swiftly taken refuge on higher ground and was looking back at Florida in shock. Hey, you may not know me, but your grandfather has known me for many years. Perhaps you've heard of the name Edwin." Edwin's voice still sounded rather non-committal. "Grand Magus Edwin of the Calamity Church, it's you, old monster," Florida cried out with shock as he swept his gaze over Han Shao's body. He waved his hand retreat. The Rainbow Sickle mercenary band members completely obeyed Florida's orders and retreated swiftly, obviously greatly afraid of Edwin. "Want to run? It won't be that easy." Edwin's voice sounded again. He quickly chanted a profound magical spell. 2 enormous Grim Reaper blades materialized in his left and right hands. They were even larger than the previous Hands of Death. The sharp blades flew quickly through the air and cut through towering trees like they were slicing through tofu. They broke apart into various chunks chunks of wood after the blade had passed through. The presence of death emanated towards Florida and the others. Two brawny and tall senior swordsmen flanking Florida had no defense against this at all, as they were carved into various pieces of meat by the blades and scattered down onto the ground in a bloody mess. Such frightening effects made Florida and the others move even faster. The appearance of such an unlucky omen had obviously disturbed Florida's previously laid plans. Even Han Sha-O was quite surprised as the ghastly wails continued to commentate a play-by-play of the casualties. "Tie him up first, I'll take care of these people." Edwin turned to speak to Belinda when he saw Florida and the others fleeing towards the Valley of Sunshine for their lives. He took out a vial of powder and gave it to Belinda. "Smeared this on his throat. He'll answer all your questions as soon as he wakes up. Don't worry, I'll make him pay." Belinda responded resolutely. Nodding, Edwin turned to leave and planned to pursue Florida and the others. Han Sha-O suddenly made his move as the Demon Slayer edge howled through the air, shooting straight for Edwin's back. Han Sha-O had planned on staying quiet for a while longer, but now that he'd witnessed Edwin's strength and realized that he was departing his attack range, he didn't plan on observing any longer. Han Sha-O decided to use this opportunity to take him out first. Edwin was stronger than Han Sha-O had assumed, as an instinctual response kicked in even when the Demon Slayer edge pierced towards him at such high speed in this short distance. A magic shield like black metal flared up, protecting the area that the Demon Slayer edge was piercing towards. PFFT. Blood sprayed everywhere. The Demon Slayer edge sank a few inches in after piercing through the thick magic shield and was then halted by an enormous force, unable to move a single bit forward. At the same time, Han Sha-O leapt up like a panther from his original position on the ground, flying past Belinda to shoot towards Edwin with the speed of lightning. Purple shell fire sparkling from his left hand as his hand formed a blade, drawing it across Edwin's neck mercilessly.